Today, we're very lucky to have with us Paula Ingabire, the Minister of ICT and Innovation for Rwanda. She spoke at several events this week, one on building human capital in Africa and one on the All Africa Digital Economy Moonshot, a plan to digitally connect every individual, business and government across Africa by 2030. So for our online audience, first of all, please welcome. And if you have any questions, submit them on the comments section of the video. And welcome to you, Paula.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for making time in your schedule. So as Minister of ICT and Innovation for Rwanda, you really oversee the country's investment in technology. Can you tell us how Rwanda is preparing young people for jobs in the high-tech sector?
Thank you. I'll start off maybe by sharing a bit of why it is important for us as Rwanda, as the government, to really be deliberate about human capital development. And part of the discussions that we had this week, really, we took a deep dive into looking at how the history of our country, where we've come from and why it has been very evident after, the conflict that happened in our country, to then focus on the most resource that we had, which is our people, and find ways of developing them. But also very cognizant that innovation, technology and science were going to be key drivers of growth for our economy, but also of transforming our economy into a knowledge-based economy. And so we've been very deliberate in terms of how do we upskill our people, but also with a very deliberate focus on how do we upskill more young people in areas and fields of STEM. And a lot of it really thanks to some of the partnerships that we've had, especially with the World Bank, that has been very instrumental in supporting us with rolling out connectivity across the country, which has been an enabling infrastructure that really has connected most of the schools and giving us a platform through which we can now start to think about digitizing our educational content, rolling out laptops and computers and all these electronic devices that students can use as a learning tool, but also improves the process of learning and teaching within schools. And that has really been a first step for us as a government, where we rolled out all this in primary and secondary schools. And the efforts are still ongoing as we onboard new students within the education system. We continue to provide devices as well as digitizing content for them to access that. And other interventions include, so recently we had the MasterCard Foundation open up a regional center for innovative teaching and learning. And what they're doing is really thinking critically about how to leverage EdTech innovations to close the gap of quality and access as well as relevant learning within secondary schools. And this is really a good partnership for us to have as a government, because then we're very deliberate about how we leverage technology in this. Then the other thing was, yes, all this that we've been doing is really to expose our young people to STEM fields and even to think about taking a career and pursuing further studies within STEM fields. But beyond exposing them, then we've also had to deliberately think about creating pathways where at a very early stage, before getting into tertiary education, they can start to have very specialized programs through which we create the critical mass of skills that we need. So an example of that is the Rwanda Coding Academy that we recently launched, and this starts at secondary school, where you have a very targeted curriculum on embedded programming, cybersecurity, and what happens after 3 years is that you have students that can quickly join the workforce if they choose to, or immediately be eligible for a university degree if they choose to go for tertiary education. I think this is a good thing because it helps us to create a critical mass at both primary and secondary levels, and then when they get through the tertiary education system, we see more people coming out. Finally, what we're also doing is to, because Rwanda, we're positioning ourselves as a Pan-African hub that nurtures and develops these high-end type of STEM skills. And we've been able to attract institutions that have been instrumental in that journey. We have the Carnegie Mellon University that has set up their Africa campus in Kigali. And there's a diverse community of students from across Africa that are coming to do their master's degree from Carnegie Mellon. similar to the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences that is also running a master's degree on artificial intelligence, and most notably the Andela program, really that skills developers across the community. So you have a distributed workforce across Africa, but also they are training developers that are then afforded a job, a developer job through the Andela community. So in a nutshell, those are some of the efforts that as a government we've deliberately and intentionally thought through, from primary school through to secondary and tertiary education, but also thinking of now, once we have created those skills, what next? And this is where we create innovation hubs and accelerators so that we can nurture some of these homegrown innovative solutions that are going to transform the continent.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And so women, young women, how can we get them involved in the ICT sector? What are you all doing specifically to target young women?
So I think this is a multi-pronged approach towards encouraging more women to get into ICT and STEM fields. And I personally believe that's a role that even starts with families and communities, because we need to start to demystify technology, STEM and ICT. We need to be able to break the stereotypes around more women getting into ICT fields, and always viewing tech and ICT as a male-dominated field. And I feel all of this starts within the families. This starts at home, where parents know that your daughter, your son can all have equal opportunities to really get into some of these fields, and not really trying to chart a path for your kids in different ways. The second thing is putting in place targeted mentorship programs, something that both the World Bank, ITU, and most governments have been very instrumental in, really picking role model women that are in STEM fields, that have excelled, and then they speak to these young girls and really try to encourage them to know that this is also a field, that it's a level playing field for both girls and boys. And lastly, being deliberate about creating opportunities for women, and whether it means training programs, whether it means business, nurturing businesses, women-owned businesses, but really being deliberate about that, so that we start to see more and more women-owned businesses within the ICT field, but also more and more girls getting into STEM fields.
Can I actually ask then, you talk about the importance of family perhaps and the mentorships. Did you have that yourself? How did you actually choose this path?
So I was born to a father who's an engineer, and I always looked up to him. I mean, just like any daughter and their father. And being the first girl, he was my role model growing up. And so, and I always aspired to be an engineer. I wanted to be an engineer just like him. He was a mechanical engineer. I didn't end up being a mechanical engineer, but I just felt like engineering is something I needed to do. But also I felt like even in our very formative years as children at home, he got us involved in doing lots and lots of mathematics, type of exercises at home. Even during the holidays, I remember there were times where it felt like every day when he went to work, we had at least 50 to 100 math questions that we had to, we had to sit down and walk through before you think about watching TV or going to play.
He's a tiger dad.
But he was very deliberate about exposing my brothers and my sisters to the same type of exercises. He didn't in any way exclude us. And just even our mother, I mean, they always made sure that we all had similar opportunities. They didn't distinguish between who is going to be doing science or math or English. We all had the same set of questions, of course, given our different levels where we were in school. And I feel like that was very instrumental in really shaping my desire to really get into an engineering career.
Wow, well, your family must be so proud to have seen your path.
I want to believe so.
I absolutely know that. So Paula, you've spoken about the need for digital technology to be interoperable and inclusive. Can you tell us exactly what that means and how you can achieve that?
This has been more in light of the whole digital transformation agenda that we're trying to undertake as a continent, but also as a globe. And then specific to the African continent, as we start to think about trade and economic integration, as we start to think about single digital markets, as we start to think about platforms like digital IDs, where we're going to need cross-border mutual recognition of some of these systems, it then becomes obvious that and very evident that we start to think about working together as governments as we roll out systems that are going to be talking to each other, country to country, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, to find ways of designing systems that are interoperable. And I think that's very fundamental for us. Otherwise, what will end up happening is we're creating very siloed solutions that at the end of the day are going to need to have to communicate. Then some people are going to have to reinvest in creating new solutions that really are responding to shared standards and regulations. And I think that's why it's important as a continent, as we start to think very deliberately about how we collectively transform our economies into digital economies, that we start to think of those shared platforms and solutions that we all are going to have a stake in, and create those shared standards that we start to design our solution towards. And when it comes to inclusion, it's multifaceted. You're looking at economic inclusion, gender inclusion, you're looking at people with disabilities. How much of that are we thinking about critically when we design some of these solutions? And so that is why as we really shape and design Africa's digital transformation agenda, these become like the baseline features, the baseline principles that we need to be thinking about as governments and partners alike.
That's great, thank you. So what advice would you give a young tech entrepreneur in Rwanda or in any African country?
Because we're talking about tech, maybe it won't be just specific to Rwanda, because digital technologies really go beyond the geographic boundaries that we're talking about. But also as a continent, we're looking at a common market. And so my very first advice is really being able to think global, building global solutions, building solutions that are going to be replicated across the different communities all over the continent. And that's very important, because when you build a solution and you're just thinking of Rwanda, you're almost constraining yourself to the Rwandan market, which at some point is going to be saturated. And so really having that global view of saying, I'm creating a solution that can be used in Ghana, in Kenya, in Senegal, anywhere, in Egypt, in Rwanda, I think it's very fundamental for us to be able to essentially create African unicorns at some point in time, in the near future actually. The other second advice I would give entrepreneurs is really building partnerships. Partnerships are everything. You need partnerships to scale. You need partnerships to tap into new markets. And this also means that by partnerships, you're looking for skills that you do not necessarily have as a tech entrepreneur. You might be very good technically, but you need business savvy people that are going to come in and really think through the business model of this innovative solution that you've put in place. But also really hiring teams that are very passionate about continuous learning, because technology is evolving at a very fast rate. And so if you don't have a team that is continuously learning and disrupting themselves, then someone else is going to come and disrupt them. And so I think it's very important to think about those kind of partnerships that are going to push you to do better and greater things. And lastly is really our entrepreneurs need to start to create products and services and solutions that focus on the customer, not just a product. Because when you do that, you're building a solution that actually responds to a need. And when you do that, you're bringing new to the world type of solutions, as opposed to duplicating something that has happened elsewhere, whether it's in Europe or anywhere, and trying to fit it to the African context.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate your commitment to getting Africa connected. There's a lot of work to do, but let's get that moonshot done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.